Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody to our Humanate Experience in Flux webinar for today. And we're going to be looking at how understanding Gen Alpha is the key to designing customer experiences, not just for Gen Alpha, but for all of us today and tomorrow. Now, I'm joined by some fantastic colleagues today, Eva Lai here in Hong Kong. Hi, Eva, and also Michelle Perez over there in Manila. So hi, Michelle, as well. They're going to be helping us share some of the content that we've got today. So welcome to them, welcome to you, and well, let's kick off, shall we? Well. First things, why experience? Why focus on experience? Well, experience matters perhaps more for your brand than you may be thinking. For decades, marketeers have believed that advertising is, the glamorous side of things. The advertising is what builds brands. But actually, reality is a bit more nuanced than that. And in our recent study here, we just completed, well, just this week, with around 4,000 consumers across APAC. 70% said that the way a brand treats people matters more than what it sells. And that chimes with other research we've seen in other studies, which show that experience count for something like 3/4 of brand perceptions and paid advertising only for about a quarter. So every app, every interaction, every service call, every product encounter shapes how people see your brand far more than maybe your latest campaign. So experience really matters. And with that, let's dive into how we can help you leverage some of the insights and themes we've got today to enrich your experiences and drive your brand. So, quick heads up, what are we going to be covering today? Well, we're going to be diving into liquid expectations in a minute as a bit of an introduction. I'll tell you more. We're also going to be doing a little bit of a fly stock tour of Gen Alpha, the most liquid generation on the planet today, before moving into some inspiration from them into personalization and signature delights. So we've got plenty to cover, so let's crack on with the content today. So well, as you probably know, technology has made it much more affordable for companies to deliver on customer-centric experiences. I mean, it's been years, decades really, since Amazon introduced the one-click ordering, same day delivery, all that kind of frictionless e-commerce, right? But that sort of became the norm, and it's affecting every sector now, isn't it? So even things like doctors' visits, I think, are starting to follow some of that kind of path of immediacy with things like telemedicine. But also, as well as making it easier for brands to be more customer centric, it's also raising the stakes for customer expectations. And again, in the research we recently conducted across APAC, we found that 74% of consumers are saying that great experiences in one sector raise their expectations on brands in another sector. So it turns out expectations are what many people say are increasingly liquid. Your brand is not just compared to the competitors in your own category or your own market. People are comparing right across the board. And that's despite the fact that many brands still benchmark within their category, right? So the experience of, say, ordering an Uber is something now that people compare with the ease or difficulty of using their banking app or booking a flight on their travel app. And customers are literally between these brands and apps on their phones every day. So expectations have risen and they've got more liquid. That's also why, with all this technology, younger generations are having an increased and some might say outsized influence in shaping expectations of services, brands, and experiences across all ages. And interestingly, our research also showed that, would you believe it, 81% of adults are admitting that they ask younger people, that's people under 25, for advice on technology or digital experiences. And a further, well, 51%, around half of parents or grandparents are admitting that kids in their households are influencing purchasing decisions across categories. hitting a high of 64% on food and dining. So what you eat as a household is very likely to be influenced by kids. But amazingly, even on a low, inverted commas, of 38% for banking and finance. So a third of kind of decisions, even in finance, are being influenced by kids in households. So it means that if you want to know where experiences are flowing, if you like, or where they're heading, one way is to check in with Gen Alpha. That's everyone who's kind of 15 years or younger. Some of you, I'm sure, have got some siblings like that or some kids in your households. And as our CFO says, if you want to know where to invest, ask your kids what's getting popular. And this generation, Gen Alpha, they're raised on real-time recommendations, interactive content. They're not just digital natives, some say they're experience natives. So looking through life through their lens is a great way to help us define what good experiences will look like for all of us, all generations in the future. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Michelle to give us a little bit of a rundown and a reminder of what are the characteristics of Generation Alpha. Over to you, Michelle.
Thanks, Scott. So, in the Philippines, our population is actually comprised of 30% Gen Alphas. And as you may know, one of the things Gen Alphas are best known for is being on their screens. So, they also heavily interact with voice assistants and other tech platforms since their infancy. That's why for them, seamless digital interaction isn't that impressive. It is already expected. Now, although it has to be said, too much screen time is a concern for parents. Thus, many are also now trying to balance screen behavior with moments that feel real, tangible, and human. That's why we also see that 43% of Gen Alpha say that they enjoy time away from screens and crave offline activities. Now, beyond screens, many of this generation have also grown up interacting with AI. So aside from being known as Gen Alphas, they are often referred to as Gen AI. So data from Pew Research shows that 1 in 2 8 to 11 years olds have used generative AI tools. And as it turns out, they don't just use technology as a tool. So they treat it as their sidekick, a co-creator, and an amplifier to their imagination. So they use these tools to spark ideas, to fuel storytelling. So it's an extension of their creativity. In fact, let's take a look at this 8-year-old girl, as you can see on your screen. And she is using Cursor AI to build a website. And she has zero coding experience from before. So this generation is really revealing to us that it's never been easier to create things like an app or a website yourself. So for all the UX designers listening in, you can take note of this. Okay? Now the barrier to creativity is so low now. So it has never been easier to create your own content. So while 72% of Gen Alpha parents say that their child expects content made just for them, it's also clear that Gen Alpha doesn't just want content to be made for them, they increasingly want to be co-authors. So now, this is also why they grow up expecting brands to adapt to their preferences, their moods, and their identities in real time. So, from the shows that they stream to the learning tools that they use, Gen Alpha is growing up in a world where everything adapts to them. So, they've grown up with content and platform that mold themselves to their preferences, their behavior, and even their moods, all in real time. That's why, indeed, 64% of 6 to 11-year-olds are saying that they prefer brands that adapt to their preferences. So, this means that Gen Alpha also prefer dynamic, sensory, layered content for learning over your static and text heavy formats. So, another name for Gen Alphas is the quote unquote voice generation, as many are also known to interact with tech like Siri using voice rather than typing it out like us older generation. That's why when the content is immersive, when it's curiosity driven and rich in sensory stimulation, they don't just engage, they go deep. In fact, 60% say that they learn best through watching videos or even playing games. Now, in the end, understandably, there are concerns, especially from educators or even parents, on the significant influence of technology among Gen Alpha today. And it's easy to characterize all these interactions with technology negatively, can be as a sign of diminishing attention spans or what has been termed culturally as brain rot. So we see here with this boy who has been raised on a steady stream of visuals, interactive and meme-based media, he is processing information across multiple sensory channels simultaneously. But ultimately, there appears something of a paradigm shift in the way human beings are interacting with technology. So, what's being referred to as brain rot culture can be seen not only as a sign of diminishing attention, but a reshaping of focus as well. So, your Gen Alpha, they think in video, they learn through play, and they thrive in multisensory environments. And this is helping them develop a hyper selective filtering system where they quickly tune out anything that doesn't captivate or feel immediately relevant. So while concerns will continue over the influence of technology and getting the balance right for kids, some futurists are talking about a new stage of evolution with human beings developing a seventh sense or what we call the digital sense. So to summarize, Gen Alpha represents the coming together of digital and human, the new human, some would say. And it's challenging all of us to consider the right balance between human and technology. But what is certain is that it is setting a new bar for more fluid, more dynamic, more personalized, and immersive experiences. So, what do you think, or how do you feel about these observations from the Gen Alpha, Scott?
Well, thanks, Michelle. Well, I have to say, some of those videos they look very familiar. Some of the kids in my household certainly engaging with technology and screens like that. So, yeah, familiar stuff, I would say. And it sounds from what you're saying that personalization is like a really big thing for Gen Alpha, right? And I think what we'll see and we'll turn to now is that it's not just Gen Alpha where that we're seeing that rising importance of personalization or personalized journeys. I think also with Gen Alpha, you mentioned a lot about the need for fun and immersion and making things interesting and co-creative. And we're going to touch on that as well in the area of delights. So thanks very much, Michelle. Let's move on then and use that as inspiration to dig into these two topics we have here. So first of all, personalization. I would say personalization has been around for a while, hasn't it? It's sort of a feature that people have been mentioning. But I think with the advent of AI, and as you see some of these trends coming in, it's becoming not just an option, but a default for not just alpha, but for all ages. People, everyone wants brands to know them, to anticipate things and evolve with where they're heading in their lives. And indeed, we saw this back in earlier in the year with our What Matters Trends study, some of you may recall, which showed the importance of empowerment and autonomy for consumers these days. Basically, because after decades of so many choices and more is more is more, and people saying actually more is not better. It's moving to what only what matters is what I want, seeking more curated choices, offering fewer, better, and more meaningful options that align with people's values and their needs. So we've already seen that happening, and the recent survey that we put together across the region for this webinar also starts to build on that view and shows the expectations for personalized journeys, in particular personalized experiences, is growing across all generations. This data is amongst all adults. So, and we had 74% expecting experiences to feel personalized to who I am and what I need. And another 74% said brands should adapt their communications and offerings based on my needs. Finally, almost half indeed admitting that generic customer experiences feel frustrating. So there's definitely a bit of a shift towards personalization, not just for Gen Alpha, but for everyone. But when we look at some of the brands out in the market, this is where we're more likely to be at the moment. Journeys are relatively generic and reactive. This is just an example of some desk research for an insurer where we saw significant opportunities to really go beyond what the current experience is, which, as you can see, is quite manual. This is for policy renewals for insurance. It's quite manual, quite reactive, sort of one size fits all journey. So there's a lot of opportunity out there to improve on this and to personalize things more. And indeed, consultants, the Boston Consulting Group, has shown that even in quite heavily regulated industries like this, like insurance and financial services, there are some companies who are starting to leapfrog the competition by changing this and making this reality much more personalized. Now, as we've seen with Gen Alphas, and Gen Alphas being digital natives, they're a great window, a kind of a leading edge consumer window to help us reimagine what are the possibilities for personalization to go from those kind of generic journeys that we have today. And we wanted to just illustrate some of the principles that we heard from Michelle there and show how we can use those as inspiration, what we call personalization codes or experience design principles to reimagine experiences in more personalized ways. So we've distilled some of those themes you heard about Gen Alpha from Michelle into these personalization codes. And I think Eva's going to share a little bit more about the sorts of personalization that we can get inspiration from Gen Alpha to apply to all generations. Over to you, Eva.
Sure, thanks, Scott. There are a lot of different experience design codes, and we have summarized them into four key themes here. So the first one, we call it identity path, which means it is a personalized response that grows with your evolving identity and values. And the second one is co-created tracks, which means personalization as collaboration where you co-author your experience. And then there is sensory synchrony, which means that senses come together to meet your needs in a given moment or context. And the last one, which is also the most interesting one, and we will explain further, we call it anticipatory care, which is an emotionally mindful personalization that anticipates your needs. So even though these principles are inspired by Gen Alpha, they are actually applicable to all generations. As we quantify that amongst the general population, it does demonstrate that they are very important across different generations. So say, for example, 74% of the adults across APAC felt it is quite important for brands' recommendations to change and evolve as their personal interests, values, and identity evolved. Or that 70% also felt that they should be able to actively co-create an experience. So now let's move on to finding out more about anticipatory care. So this is about delivering seamless preemptive support by using predictive intelligence, behavior signals, and contextual cues to meet the needs before they are even noticed. So there is in a survey in APAC, as many as 82% of the consumers felt that brands should know what I need before I have to ask. And the underlying consumer insight for this is that people actually want brands to be proactive and solve problems almost magically before they arise. And the potential applications and inspiration from different sessions have shown that there are some examples like smart nudges in health and well-being that anticipate the need for hydration. Hey, it's time for another bottle of water, lowering screen time like YouTube always prompt me to go to bed, or changing posture like your Apple Watch always reminds you to stand up. Or in ecom, it's very popular and everyone is familiar with. They will show you what you are buying, any further suggestions, or ways to find savings, etc. So these experience guardrails also highlight the importance of getting the right balance in anticipation. There is just a fine line between feeling intrusive versus supportive, and we have to be careful about that. So let's look around, and there are actually some examples of brands doing a good job on this. They span from hospitality to travel and the insurance. So if we look at the top right, there is China Ping An Insurance. They're providing travel insurance with automated benefits. So in case you experience flight delays or cancellations, you will be automatically provided with lounge access and flight rebooking services. Or on the bottom left, there is an engine driven by AI called Deep Brew by Starbucks. They will analyze your purchase history and the local weather and other contextual information at the moment in time to suggest personalized menu items. Or on the bottom right, there is a platform called Better Up, which is quite interesting. They proactively activate personal coaching for employees, helping them navigate the challenges before they escalate. So this platform uses data to match us individuals with coaches, offering ongoing support, maximizing performance, retention, and resilience by addressing these issues early. So you can see that by applying these design codes, we can already start bringing inspirations for brands to move beyond generic journeys into the more personalized ones. So over to you, Scott. What are some of the implications for consumer engagements?
Thanks, Eva. Yeah, so some great inspirations there. Just taking those codes, looking at those examples, and starting to reimagine more, generic journeys as something more anticipatory, something more co-create with more co-creation. And that's just a starting point, and that's why when we go on to actually engage consumers and we start to talk to them about experiences and explore and reframe journeys, it starts to set up a more dynamic view of things, a more, we start to look at things in a more personalized way. So, for example, we were recently talking to consumers on our collective community in the UK and US about their experiences. And we wanted to step back and talk to them about learning and learning journeys, but in a broader way, learning about hobbies, learning about something interesting in their life, passing a driving test, or something serious like investments. And by taking a step back and engaging people in that way more broadly in their lives, it really opened up a new view of how do people learn about things, and produce this kind of cyclical view of a learning journey with different kind of entry points and loops, depending on how easy or difficult, or whether people are in a state of flow as they go around learning about a new thing, a new hobby, or a new interest, etc. With very personalized entry points happening across this kind of circular journey. And as an illustration, we thought it would be kind of fun to take that and apply some of those personalization codes that Eva was talking about to a specific example, which is learning about finances and investments. And I have to say, we took a bit of a leaf out of Jen Alpha's book, because you remember the little girl there that Michelle showed who was doing her own coding. We said, well, if Jen Alpha can do that, we should be able to do that. So we were taking some of those learnings, taking some of those codes, and applying it to learning about finances and converting it pretty quickly using vibe coding into some of the app ideas that you see here. And so the first example here is applying anticipatory care to a stage of that learning about finances journey. And you can see in this case, the suggested prototype app detects when users are overwhelmed by the level of investment choices based on their behavior in the app, and then automatically initiates a simpler user experience. with suggestions such as a calm mode, plainer, simpler explanations of concepts about investment, and so on and so forth. And we had another little prototype here, which is quite interesting, based on one of the other codes that personalization codes that Eva showed you, identity paths. So, and you can see here, this particular prototype is about when you set up your profile on an investment app. It's actually helping you see your future self, sort of celebrating what you might look like, hopefully in a good way, as you achieve various potential financial goals through your life. So another way to sort of bring personalization in and show how we can match people's identity and their goals and their path through life. So good news, we were able to do what Gen Alpha does. I hope it gives you a bit of an idea of the very sort of fluid way in which you can start reimagining and creating ideas quickly around different journeys. So, well, in the end, though, I think what this is all saying is that the traditional way we've looked at customer journeys, the way we've done journey maps, is looking pretty static and pretty linear, I would say. And it's not going to be enough, I would say, in the new reality where personalization is coming through and generic touch points are leaving customers feeling disengaged. So to finish off on this theme of personalization, ultimately personalization we believe will be a really key in helping brands boost their relevance and drive growth. That's not just us. People like Boston Consulting Group, as I said before, say that brands leading in personalization are going to grow faster. They estimate over the next 5 years there's going to be a shift of $2 trillion US. Well, in revenue between the winners and losers of the personalization game. So it's worth thinking about this for your brands. But in the time we've got, let's move on to the other key inspiration area that we were talking about after Michelle's sharing on Gen Alpha, which is delight and fun and what we call signature delights, which again is about moving beyond kind of a basic satisfaction, basic utility, and kind of transactional experiences to design experiences that spark more emotion and bring joy. Now, if you step back, it's worth remembering the behavioral scientists have this thing called the peak end rule. And what the peak end rule says is that we don't remember experiences as an average of satisfaction scores. People don't remember things the way that we have in our PowerPoint decks. Instead, they remember them as stories, right? They remember the peaks, maybe the troughs as well, but the ups and downs of the next story. The classic example being, of course, well, for us, where we live is Disneyland. The fair and the fireworks at the end, is a big peak to that experience. So, it's really important if you want your experiences to be distinctive that you create these peaks. And indeed, this is in line with the trends. Again, we saw earlier in the year with our What Matters trend reports that people are indeed looking for more what we called micro joys in their everyday lives and more emotion in their experiences from brands. And I recall this one because it was particularly pronounced here in Hong Kong. It was the number one trend, people asking for more joy in their everyday lives. And that's continued with our recent survey that we put together the last few weeks, as I said, which also shows that expectations for surprise delight across generations is really gathering momentum. So as you see here, 81% of all adults saying, I value small moments of surprise or joy in my interaction with brands. And not on the slide, but another 77% said, I remember brands that go above and beyond to delight me. So, delight is really important, but beyond surprise and memorability, what sort of delights can we think of, Eva? We can draw on from our inspirations from Gen Alpha.
Yes, Scott, definitely. We have identified some experience design codes for personalized journeys. And so as for signature delights, in fact, they're pretty consistent. So let me share with you further. So the first one is milestone magic, which means infusing delight through celebrating personal moments and achievements with meaningful cues and feedback. And the second one we call it surprise sparks. bringing joy through small sparks of surprise to break through the predictable and the everyday. And the third one we call it peer power, which is authentic peer driven connections. Through joy, through social resonance. And the last one, which is also the most interesting one to me, is about sensory refresh, adding tactile, low stimulation, not overstimulating, or sensory interactions that offer moments of grounding and emotional relief. So again, these codes inspired by Gen Alpha are actually relevant to all the other generations as well. So as you can see, as many as 70%, 77% of consumers actually value calm and comforting experience when they need them across all generations. So let's take a look at this design delight code. So again, this is about infusing playful pauses that help people to recenter themselves. And the underlying consumer insights on the next slide is that actually there is a need for slowness and reconnection in a very loud world. We have enough stimulation offline, online, from people around you, from your phone and all the other digital gadgets every day. So interestingly, this code is not about making things loud or bright or colorful. It is a more announced expression of sensory refreshment where things can reconnect people with the presence and with themselves in a more thoughtful ways. So we see applications across different sectors, be it is like immersive retail or grounded waiting rooms or more soothing workspaces. And the key guardrail for this code is that the integration of the senses, both physical or digital, but avoidance of overstimulation. So there are some nice examples from different brands. Say for example, my favorite brand, Lululemon, they have this mind philosophy spaces with areas with guided meditation or mindful practices that helps people to relieve emotionally and ground themselves a little bit more. Or in hospitality industry, Marriott, they allow people to visit and experience aspirational destination without really packing or boarding on a plane. They use Oculus Rift and 40 sensory elements. Or another favorite brand of myself, Lego, they actually provide these free sensory bags for people to use so that they can enjoy shopping and reduce the sensory overload. And in this bag, there are some items like noise reducing headphones, fidgeting tools, or visual cue cards, or strip reducing glasses. So these are quite interesting, and I'm sure there are some further implications for the design, Scott.
Thanks, Eva. Yeah, that's great. Those delight principles, those delight codes, really helping to get at the nuances of what consumers might find valuable to elevate the experiences and the journeys that and help brands build delight into those experiences. And I think they're really useful because it turns out really that when you do normal research, let's say, and you actually talk to customers directly, what we found is that customers are they can't really articulate what you should do as a brand to delight them because delight is about surprise. So, what should I do to surprise you? And so it's hard to get at these things with a direct question. And what we're discovering is that some of the types of delight codes that you shared, Eva, are really useful at the beginning of projects, what we call the now stage of a project, when we're just looking at the current journey and trying to think about possibilities. Where can we take this journey beyond the current sort of transactional reality it's in today? And things like the delight codes that you shared are a good way to start and start to imagine different ways with a client on how we can stretch this and create those kind of peaks that we talked about earlier. Of course, we do end up talking to customers. It's not all about desk research and things, but we would go into what we call the wow. And for the wow for us is really about creating that delight, because when we talk to customers, we don't want to just talk to them about the operational transactional journey of a given category or brand. We want to connect to real human sparks. We want to understand the life stories, the things that they care about or really enjoy in their lives, that we can connect the the transactional journey too, to kind of elevate it. And of course, things like insight communities, many of you know we're very passionate about communities, but it does bring a way to essentially bring those customers to life, bring those moments in their lives to life, which we can use to elevate journeys with delight. And then finally, what we've had some really great experiences with clients this year is then going on to actually create delight concepts, co-create with the client or co-create with consumers in those communities, and then test them back with other consumers to show that they do indeed have impact. In terms of uplifting things like NPS. Now, of course, AI has been very useful in helping us create concepts and find themes quicker and quicker, but of course, it all depends, of course, on human consultancy as well. So ultimately, when it comes to customer experience, the traditional view of fixed pain points or just fixing pain points is no longer enough. Many companies kind of look at pain points and kind of try and reduce the pain points. That's no longer enough. The game is, how can we create those delights? How can we create those peaks? Indeed, Forrester Consulting has showed that elevating peaks in experience can drive 8 times more revenue versus just simply removing negatives or removing pains. So there's a strong motivation for looking at where you can create delight. So ultimately, creating moments that matter for people is great for business. And the strongest predictor now, I would say, of growth is not about how satisfied customers are, it's about how distinctive you make your experience through things like personalization, but also through delight. And again, consultancies like McKinsey are estimating that the ability to create delight can amplify NPS, as we've seen in some of our research, by something like 15 to 30 points. So for those of you who have your bonuses linked to NPS, there might be a strong motivation here to consider where you could create some delight. So wrapping up, that's all we've got time for today. Um, let's just do a quick summary here. Sorry. Yes, so wrapping up today, we covered experiences matter. So they're a key driver of brand perception, perhaps more of a driver than your latest advertising campaign, unfortunately. We spoke about how technology has leveled the playing field on customer centricity and raised liquid expectations. You're compared to not just brands within your sector, but across sectors. And we saw that Gen Alpha, as digital natives, are a great source of inspiration to help us think about where things are going, particularly around personalization and particularly around delights, as we've got here. And ultimately, growth is going to come from brands which don't just focus on generic journeys or pain points. It's going to come from making things personally relevant and distinctive in terms of brand experiences. I hope you found this interesting. I hope you can continue the conversation with us in the future. There are some great opportunities to do so. We've got a roadshow of course, personalized client meetings coming up where we can explore how these principles can be linked to your particular contexts and situations. We've also got some client events coming up where we'll do a little bit of more creative, hopefully fun and delightful vibe coding and getting a bit creative, getting a bit social and having a bit of fun. So plenty of stuff coming. And if you've got a moment before you carry on with your normal everyday work, we'd love to hear your feedback. QR code here. If you can take a quick picture of that and give us a quick feedback. I think it's just a couple of questions that will be great. And before we close off, if you have any questions, we can by all means, put them in the chat and we'll love to get your feedback and see what questions you have. Thank you once again for joining us.